Deep in the frozen wilderness of the Rocky Mountains, where temperatures plunge to unimaginable depths and survival seems impossible, a story unfolded that would challenge everything we know about human endurance. This is the story of Marcus Webb, a seasoned mountain guide who faced the ultimate test of survival, and his loyal dog, Bear, whose unwavering determination would make all the difference between life and death. If you're enjoying the content, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel. Marcus Webb had spent 23 years guiding expeditions through the treacherous peaks of the Colorado Rockies. At 47, he knew these mountains better than anyone, understood their moods, respected their power. His weathered face told stories of countless winters. His calloused hands bore witness to years of rope work and ice climbing. But more than his experience, what defined Marcus was his companion, Bear, a 6-year-old Alaskan Malamute who had been by his side for the past 5 years. It was late January when Marcus accepted what would become his most challenging assignment. A wealthy businessman named Richard Hoffman wanted to reach the summit of Mount Elbert during the harshest season, seeking what he called an authentic wilderness experience. Marcus had reservations. The weather forecasts predicted an unprecedented cold front moving through the region, with temperatures expected to drop to record lows. But Hoffman was insistent, and the payment was substantial enough to fund Marcus's small guide service through the slow spring season. They set out on a Tuesday morning, the sky deceptively clear. Marcus, Richard, Bear, and 2 other experienced guides, Sarah Chen and David Rodriguez, began their ascent from the base camp at dawn. The initial climb went smoothly. Marcus led the group with practiced efficiency, choosing routes he had traversed hundreds of times. Bear bounded ahead, occasionally circling back to check on the group, his thick fur coat seeming impervious to the cold. By midday, they had reached the first waypoint, a sheltered outcrop where they stopped for lunch. Marcus checked his equipment meticulously: GPS tracker, emergency beacon, satellite phone, first aid kit. Everything was in order. Sarah, a skilled mountaineer in her early 30s, noticed the subtle changes in the wind patterns. She caught Marcus's eye, and he nodded. They both felt it. Something was shifting in the atmosphere. "We should consider turning back," Sarah suggested quietly, not wanting to alarm Richard. "The conditions are changing faster than predicted." Marcus studied the sky. Thin clouds were beginning to streak across the blue expanse, moving with unusual speed. His instincts, honed by years in the mountains, told him Sarah was right, but Richard was already expressing his frustration at the suggestion of retreat. "We've barely started," Richard protested, his voice sharp with determination. "I didn't pay all this money to turn back at the first sign of difficulty." Marcus tried to explain that this wasn't about difficulty, it was about safety. The mountains demanded respect, not conquest. But Richard's ego was invested now, and he threatened to continue alone if necessary. Marcus knew he couldn't allow that. A man alone in these conditions, inexperienced, would be dead within hours if the weather truly turned. They pressed on, Marcus making the difficult decision that he would regret for the rest of his life. By 3 in the afternoon, the temperature had dropped 15 degrees. The wind picked up, cutting through layers of insulated clothing like they were paper. Bear stayed closer now, his usual playfulness replaced by alert wariness. At 17,000 feet, disaster struck. The cold front arrived with devastating speed, bringing winds that howled with primal fury and temperatures that plummeted catastrophically. Visibility dropped to mere feet as snow whipped horizontally across the mountainside. Marcus immediately called for emergency shelter procedures. They needed to dig in, wait out the storm. But nature had other plans. As they scrambled to set up their emergency tent, a sudden gust, what meteorologists would later estimate at over 90 miles per hour, caught Richard off balance. He stumbled backward toward the edge of a steep slope. Marcus lunged forward, grabbing for Richard's jacket. For a moment their eyes met, then the ground beneath Marcus's feet gave way. The avalanche wasn't massive, but it was enough. Marcus felt himself tumbling, the world spinning in a chaos of white and grey. He heard Sarah screaming his name, heard Bear's desperate barking. Then his head struck something hard, and everything went dark. When Marcus regained consciousness, he couldn't tell if it was minutes or hours later. He was buried in snow up to his chest. His left leg was pinned beneath a boulder, pain radiating through his entire body. His right arm hung at an unnatural angle, clearly broken. Blood trickled down his face from a gash above his eyebrow, freezing almost instantly in the brutal cold. He tried to move, but agony shot through him. His radio was gone, swept away in the fall. His emergency beacon was somewhere under the snow, possibly crushed. He called out, but his voice was swallowed by the screaming wind. The cold was unlike anything he had ever experienced. It wasn't just uncomfortable, it was actively aggressive, seeking out any remaining warmth in his body and stealing it away. Marcus assessed his situation with the clinical detachment that survival training had taught him. He was seriously injured, trapped, exposed to temperatures that his damaged equipment registered at -68 degrees Celsius before the display froze and went dark. He had no way to signal for help, no shelter, and limited ability to move. Even with his years of experience, he knew the odds of survival were minimal. But then he heard it, a sound that cut through the wind. Barking. Bear had found him. Sarah Chen stood at the base camp, her hands shaking as she spoke into the satellite phone. The storm had hit with such ferocity that their group had been scattered. David had managed to help Richard back to safety, both men suffering from frostbite and hypothermia, but alive. But Marcus was gone, and Bear had disappeared into the storm, presumably searching for his master. "We need immediate rescue operations," Sarah said, her voice cracking despite her efforts to remain composed. Marcus Webb, 47 years old, experienced guide, last seen at approximately 17,000 feet on the northeast face. He fell during the avalanche. We couldn't reach him before conditions deteriorated further. The rescue coordinator on the other end of the line delivered the news Sarah already knew in her heart. "Ma'am, current conditions make any rescue attempt impossible. Wind speeds are exceeding 80 miles per hour, visibility is 0, and the temperature has dropped to -71 Celsius at elevation. We cannot risk additional lives. We'll deploy teams as soon as the storm breaks." "Huh? How long?" Sarah asked, though she knew the answer would be devastating. "Current forecasts show the storm system lingering for at least 36 hours. I'm sorry." Sarah ended the call and sat down heavily on a supply crate. 36 hours in those conditions, injured and exposed. No one could survive that. The rescue coordinator hadn't said it explicitly, but the implication was clear. When they went up, they would be recovering a body, not rescuing a survivor. David approached, his face pale beneath his frost-damaged skin. "What did they say?" "They can't send anyone until the storm clears," Sarah replied, her voice hollow. "David, we both know what that means. Marcus has been out there for 7 hours already. Even if he survived the initial fall, in these temperatures..." She didn't need to finish. They both understood hypothermia's progression. At these temperatures, death could come in hours, even for someone as experienced and prepared as Marcus. And he was injured, making survival even less likely. Richard Hoffman sat in the corner of the emergency shelter, wrapped in thermal blankets, looking shell-shocked. The reality of what his insistence had cost was beginning to sink in. "This is my fault," he whispered. "I should have listened. I should have turned back when you suggested it." Sarah wanted to be angry with him, wanted to place blame, but she was too exhausted and grief-stricken. What matters now is that we document everything for the rescue team. They'll need to know exactly where Marcus was when he fell, the conditions, everything we can remember. As Sarah began writing her report, she heard scratching at the shelter door. She opened it to find Bear, covered in ice and snow, his fur frozen into rigid spikes. But his eyes were alert, focused, and he was barking insistently. "Bear, you came back!" Sarah exclaimed, pulling the dog inside. But Bear resisted, pulling back toward the door, barking continuously. David grabbed towels and began trying to warm the dog, but Bear wouldn't stay still. He kept returning to the door, pawing at it, looking back at them with what seemed like urgent frustration. "He wants us to follow him," David said suddenly. "He knows where Marcus is." Sarah shook her head. "David, we can't go back out there. It's suicide. The rescue coordinator was explicit, but Bear made it down and back. He's telling us Marcus is alive, or he's just distressed and looking for his master," Sarah countered, though her heart wanted desperately to believe David's interpretation. Dogs don't understand death. He might just be trying to return to Marcus's location, not telling us he's alive. Bear's barking became more frantic. He grabbed Sarah's jacket sleeve in his teeth and pulled, something he had never done before. The desperation in his actions was unmistakable. If you're enjoying this story so far, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps. Richard stood up, his voice firmer than it had been since the disaster. "If there's any chance Marcus is alive, we have to try. I'll go with the dog. This is my responsibility." "You're in no condition," Sarah said firmly. "You can barely walk with that frostbite." "Then I'll go," David volunteered. "Sarah, you're the most experienced after Marcus. You need to stay here and coordinate with rescue when they're able to deploy. Give me the emergency beacon, the thermal camera if we have one, and I'll follow Bear. At minimum, I can mark Marcus's location precisely for the rescue team." Sarah wanted to refuse, wanted to order David to stay safe, but she understood the logic. And something in Bear's behavior was convincing her that this was more than a grieving dog's confusion. Animals had instincts humans couldn't fully understand, ways of sensing things beyond human perception. "Take the satellite phone," she finally said. "Stay in constant contact. If conditions worsen even slightly, you turn back immediately. That's an order, not a suggestion." David nodded, already gearing up with the best cold weather equipment they had remaining. Bear watched every movement, his tail beginning to wag slightly as he realized they were responding to his urgency. Within 20 minutes, David was ready. Sarah helped him check every piece of equipment twice. "The temperature is still minus 69 Celsius up there," she reminded him. "You have maybe 4 hours before you're risking serious injury yourself. Mark the location, confirm Marcus's status, and get back here. Don't try to move him if you find him. Wait for the professional rescue team." David adjusted his goggles and opened the shelter door. The wind immediately tried to rip it from his hands. Bear bolted out into the darkness, looking back to ensure David was following. As Sarah watched them disappear into the swirling snow, she whispered a prayer to mountains that rarely showed mercy. She had sent one man to almost certain doom already today. She couldn't bear to lose another. Marcus drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind struggling against the cold's deadly embrace. He had stopped feeling pain in his extremities hours ago, not a good sign, he knew. His training told him that when you stopped feeling cold, when numbness replaced agony, death was close. The human body could only fight hypothermia for so long before it began shutting down non-essential systems to preserve the core. But something kept pulling him back from the edge. Each time his consciousness began to slip away into that final seductive darkness, he would hear barking. Bear. His faithful companion had found him shortly after the avalanche, had dug frantically at the snow covering him, trying to free him. The dog had stayed with him ever since, lying against his chest, sharing what little body heat he could offer. Marcus knew this was killing Bear too. The dog should have returned to safety hours ago, should have descended to the base camp where there was warmth and shelter. But Bear remained, pressing close, occasionally licking Marcus's face as if trying to keep him conscious. "Good boy," Marcus whispered through cracked, frozen lips. "You need to go, get help." But even as he said it, he knew Bear wouldn't leave. Malamutes were bred for loyalty, for endurance in extreme cold. Bear would stay until the end, whatever that end might be. Marcus's thoughts drifted to his daughter, Emma. She was 19 now, studying environmental science at college. He had raised her alone after his wife Sarah passed from cancer when Emma was 7. The mountains had been their therapy, their bond. Emma had grown up hiking these peaks, learning to respect and love the wilderness that was Marcus's life. What would happen to her if he died here? Who would tell her stories about her mother? Who would walk her down the aisle someday? The thought of Emma receiving the news of her grief cut through the cold's numbing effect more sharply than any physical pain. Marcus forced his eyes open. The storm was still raging, but through the swirling snow, he could see the stars beginning to appear in patches. The wind was diminishing slightly. The worst of the storm might be passing. If he could just hold on a little longer, if rescue teams could deploy. But he knew the math. At these temperatures, the body lost heat 25 times faster than in normal conditions. Even with his high-quality gear, even with Bear's warmth, his core temperature had dropped too far. He was experiencing the paradoxical undressing impulse. His brain, confused by the cold, was telling him he was too hot. He had to fight the urge to remove his jacket, knowing it would be fatal. Marcus tried to move his trapped leg one more time, but it was frozen solid into the ice and rock. His broken arm was completely numb now. He could see his fingers through his torn glove. They were white, bloodless, clearly frostbitten beyond recovery. If by some miracle he survived this, he would lose fingers at minimum, possibly the entire hand. Bear suddenly lifted his head, ears perked. He began barking again, but this time differently, excited, hopeful. The dog stood up, though remaining close to Marcus, and barked into the darkness with renewed energy. "What is it, boy?" Marcus tried to ask, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. His throat was too frozen to speak properly. Then he heard it too, a voice distant but definitely human, calling through the wind. "Marcus! Marcus Webb! Can you hear me?" Hope surged through Marcus, a warmth more powerful than any physical heat. Someone was searching for him. He tried to call back, but his voice wouldn't cooperate. Bear barked frantically, running a few yards toward the voice and then back to Marcus, clearly trying to guide the searcher. David Rodriguez followed the barking, his powerful flashlight cutting through the diminishing snow. The thermal camera had been invaluable. Even through the storm, it had picked up the heat signatures of both dog and man. When he finally reached them, the sight nearly broke him. Marcus was buried to his chest in ice and snow, his face ghostly white, his lips blue. Blood had frozen in dark streaks down his face. He wasn't moving, his eyes closed. For a moment, David feared they were too late, but then Bear licked Marcus's face, and Marcus's eyes fluttered open. They were unfocused, confused, but alive. "Marcus, can you hear me?" David shouted, pulling off his pack and immediately deploying the emergency thermal shelter. It was a small reflective tent designed to trap body heat and protect from wind. He couldn't move Marcus, that would require the full rescue team, but he could improve his immediate conditions. Marcus's lips moved, but no sound came out. David pulled out the satellite phone. "Sarah, I found him. He's alive, but barely. We need that rescue team now." Sarah's voice crackled back, thick with emotion. "David, the rescue coordinator just called. The storm is clearing faster than predicted. They're deploying now, ETA 90 minutes. Can he hold on?" David looked at Marcus, at his frozen, damaged body, at the way his chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular breaths. "I don't know. I'm setting up thermal shelter and heat packs. Sarah, get them here as fast as possible. He's in bad shape." Leave a comment below about what you think of this story so far. David worked with practiced efficiency, wrapping Marcus in every thermal blanket he had brought, placing chemical heat packs against his core and major arteries. He gave Marcus water warmed by a small chemical heater. Not hot, which would be dangerous, but warm enough to help combat the hypothermia. Bear pressed close again, and David didn't push him away. The dog's body heat was helping. As David worked, he talked continuously, trying to keep Marcus conscious. "Your daughter Emma is going to be so relieved. Sarah called her earlier, told her about the accident. She's been waiting by the phone. You're going to see her again, Marcus. You just need to hold on a little longer. Marcus's eyes focused slightly at the mention of Emma. His lips moved again, and this time David heard the whisper, "Tell her. Love her." "You're going to tell her yourself," David insisted firmly. "Don't you dare give up now. We didn't come all this way for you to quit on us." The minutes stretched into an eternity. David monitored Marcus's vital signs as best he could, pulse weak but present, breathing shallow but continuing, pupils responsive to light. He was alive, but hovering on the edge. Then, like angels descending from heaven, David heard the helicopter. The storm had cleared just enough for the rescue team to deploy. Within minutes, the mountainside was flooded with light and activity. Paramedics swarmed Marcus's position, their movements efficient and professional. Patient is male, 47 years old. Exposure to extreme cold for approximately 12 hours. The lead paramedic reported into his radio. Core temperature reading 87 degrees Fahrenheit. Multiple injuries including compound fracture of the right radius, crush injury to the left leg, head trauma, and severe frostbite to extremities. Patient is conscious but minimally responsive, preparing for immediate evacuation. They worked to free Marcus's trapped leg, using portable heating units to melt the ice carefully. Every movement was calculated to avoid further injury. Bear stayed close, only moving aside when absolutely necessary, his eyes never leaving Marcus. As they loaded Marcus onto the rescue stretcher, one of the paramedics looked at Bear. "What about the dog?" "He comes with us," David said firmly. "He's the only reason Marcus is still alive. He stayed with him through the whole night, kept him warm, guided us to him. He's a hero." The paramedic nodded, understanding. They loaded Bear into the helicopter alongside Marcus. As the aircraft lifted off, carrying Marcus toward the hospital in Denver, the mountain guide's frozen hand moved slightly, coming to rest on Bear's head. The dog leaned into the touch, his tail giving a single exhausted wag. Against all statistical probability, against the merciless mathematics of hypothermia and exposure, Marcus Webb was going to survive. But his ordeal was far from over. The trauma unit at Denver General Hospital erupted into controlled chaos as the helicopter touched down. The medical team had been briefed during the flight. Severe hypothermia, multiple traumatic injuries, extended exposure to temperatures that should have been lethal. Dr. Patricia Moreno, the hospital's leading expert in cold weather trauma, led the response. "Get him into the warming unit immediately," she ordered, as they wheeled Marcus through the doors. "Start rewarming protocols slowly. We don't want to shock his system. I want continuous cardiac monitoring. His heart rhythm is going to be unstable as we bring his core temperature up." Emma Webb sat in the waiting room, her face pale with fear and exhaustion. She had driven through the night from her college in Boulder as soon as Sarah's call came. Now she stood as the doors burst open, catching only a glimpse of her father's stretcher before medical staff surrounded him. A nurse gently guided her back to her seat. "Your father is in the best possible hands," the nurse said kindly. "Doctor, Moreno has treated more severe hypothermia cases than anyone in the region, but you need to prepare yourself. He's in critical condition, and the next 24 hours will be crucial." The hours that followed were a blur of medical interventions. Marcus's body had essentially shut down, preserving only the most essential functions. As the medical team slowly warmed him, they discovered the full extent of his injuries. The compound fracture in his right arm required immediate surgery. His left leg had suffered severe crush injuries, and there was discussion of possible amputation. The frostbite damage to his fingers and toes was extensive. They would definitely lose some digits, possibly more. But the most concerning issue was the head trauma. Marcus had suffered a severe concussion, possibly worse. Until they could fully warm him and stabilize his condition, they couldn't run the necessary brain scans to determine if there was permanent damage. "Doctor, Moreno emerged from the trauma unit 6 hours after Marcus's arrival. She found Emma, Sarah Chen, and David Rodriguez all waiting. Bear lay at Emma's feet. The hospital had made an exception to their no animals policy, understanding the unique circumstances. "He's alive," Dr. Moreno began, and Emma nearly collapsed with relief. But his condition is extremely serious. His core temperature when he arrived was 87 degrees Fahrenheit. "We've managed to bring it up to 94, but we have to go slowly. His heart is showing irregular rhythms, not uncommon with severe hypothermia, but concerning. We've stabilized his arm with external fixation and cleaned the wounds. His leg is severely damaged, but we believe we can save it with extensive surgery and rehabilitation." "What about his hands?" Emma asked, her voice small. "My dad's hands. They're everything to him. He's a mountain guide. He needs his hands." "Doctor," Moreno's expression softened with sympathy. "I'm not going to lie to you. The frostbite damage is severe. We'll do everything we can to save as much tissue as possible, but he will lose at least 3 fingers, possibly more. We won't know the full extent for several days as the damaged tissue becomes clear." Emma's tears finally came, and Sarah moved to embrace her. "But he's alive," Sarah whispered. "Emma, by every medical standard, every statistical model, your father should be dead. The fact that he's here, that he's fighting, is a miracle." Over the following days, Marcus slowly improved. His core temperature stabilized, his heart rhythm normalized, and the brain scans showed no permanent neurological damage. The surgeries on his arm and leg were successful, though the orthopedic surgeon warned that full recovery would take months, possibly years. The frostbite damage proved as severe as feared. Marcus lost 3 fingers on his right hand, his dominant hand down to the second knuckle. He lost 2 toes on his left foot. The remaining fingers showed permanent nerve damage and reduced mobility. For a man whose livelihood depended on his hands, whose identity was built around physical capability, the loss was devastating. When Marcus finally regained full consciousness 4 days after his rescue, his first word was "Bear." "Ullas." The hospital staff arranged for the dog to visit, and the reunion brought tears to the eyes of even the most jaded nurses. Bear pressed against the hospital bed, his tail wagging frantically, licking Marcus's face with unbridled joy. "You saved my life, boy," Marcus whispered, his voice raspy from the breathing tube that had been removed only hours before. "You're a good dog, the best dog." Emma sat on the other side of the bed, holding her father's damaged hand carefully. "Dad, you scared me so much." "I'm sorry, sweetheart," Marcus replied, seeing the tears in her eyes. "I made a bad decision. I knew better, but I let ego and money cloud my judgment. I won't make that mistake again." The road to recovery was long and painful. Physical therapy was excruciating as Marcus worked to regain mobility in his injured leg and adapt to the loss of his fingers. The psychological adjustment was even harder. Depression set in as he confronted the reality that he would never guide expeditions again, not the way he used to. His identity, carefully built over 23 years, felt shattered. But Emma was there every step of the way, taking a semester off from college to help her father through rehabilitation. And Bear never left his side, seeming to understand that his human needed him more than ever. 3 months after the accident, Marcus received a visit from Richard Hoffman. The businessman looked different, humbled, changed by the experience. "I owe you my life," Richard said simply, "and I nearly cost you yours with my arrogance. I've established a foundation in your name, the Marcus Webb Mountain Safety Foundation. We're developing new safety protocols for extreme weather expeditions, funding research into cold weather survival, and providing scholarships for guides to get advanced safety training." Marcus was moved but struggled with the attention. "I'm not a hero, Richard. I made mistakes that nearly got me killed. But you survived something that should have been impossible," Richard countered. "The medical community is studying your case. The military wants to know how you lasted 12 hours at -71°C. Your survival is teaching us things that could save lives in the future. As spring arrived, Marcus began to find a new path forward. He couldn't guide the way he used to, but his knowledge and experience were more valuable than ever. He began teaching safety courses, consulting on expedition planning, and sharing his story to help others avoid similar mistakes. His writing about mountain safety became required reading in guide training programs across the country. Emma returned to college with a new focus. Her environmental science degree would now include specialized studies in extreme weather survival and climate change's impact on mountain environments. Father and daughter had found a way to turn tragedy into purpose. 6 months after his rescue, Marcus stood at the base of Mount Elbert for the first time since the accident. The summer sun was warm, a stark contrast to the deadly cold that had nearly claimed his life. Emma stood beside him, and Bear sat at his feet, tail wagging as he sensed his master's complex emotions. "Are you okay, Dad?" Emma asked, noticing the tears in her father's eyes. "I'm alive," Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. "Every morning I wake up, I remember that I shouldn't be here. The odds were impossible. The temperature, the injuries, the exposure time, any one of those factors should have killed me. All of them together? It's statistically miraculous." He looked down at his scarred hand, at the absent fingers. He had learned to adapt, to use his thumb and remaining fingers in new ways. His prosthetic toes allowed him to walk with only a slight limp. The physical scars would be with him forever, but he had come to see them differently now, not as losses, but as reminders of resilience. "The mountain gave me a gift," Marcus continued. "It didn't take my life, but it took my ego. It humbled me in a way nothing else could have. I was arrogant, Emma. I thought my experience made me invincible. I ignored my instincts and Sarah's warnings because I didn't want to disappoint a client or lose income. That arrogance nearly cost me everything." Emma squeezed her father's hand. "But you survived, and now you're helping others learn from your mistakes. Dad, the safety protocols you've developed have already prevented 3 accidents this season. The foundation Richard established has trained over 200 guides in advanced cold weather response. Your near-death experience is literally saving lives." Marcus smiled at his daughter, pride evident in his expression. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from the best," she replied, leaning against his shoulder. "You taught me to respect the wilderness, to understand that nature doesn't care about our plans or our pride. You always told me that the mountain gives and the mountain takes, and we're just visitors in its domain. You forgot that lesson for a moment, but you remembered it when it mattered most." They walked together along the trail, Bear trotting ahead, occasionally looking back to ensure they were following. Marcus moved slower than he used to, his injured leg requiring careful placement on the uneven terrain, but he moved with confidence, with awareness, with a deep appreciation for every step. Sarah Chen joined them at a scenic overlook, bringing coffee from a nearby station. She had continued her guiding work, but had become one of the strongest advocates for the new safety protocols Marcus had developed. Their shared trauma had created a bond deeper than friendship. They were survivors of an experience that would forever mark them. "I got the final report from the National Weather Service," Sarah said, handing Marcus a folder. "The temperature you were exposed to, -71°C, was the coldest ever recorded at that elevation in Colorado history. The combination of the cold front and altitude created conditions that, according to their models, should have resulted in death within 4 hours maximum." Marcus read through the report, his expression grave. "It says here that Bear's body heat, combined with the partial shelter of the avalanche debris and my gear, created a micro-environment that may have kept my core temperature just above the fatal threshold. Without Bear," he didn't need to finish. They all knew the truth. Bear had saved his life, not just by staying with him through the night, but by refusing to give up, by finding David and leading him back through conditions that should have made rescue impossible. Dogs have been saving human lives for thousands of years, Sarah observed, reaching down to scratch Bear's ears. But this might be one of the most extreme examples ever documented. The veterinarians who examined him afterward said he showed signs of early hypothermia himself. He sacrificed his own safety to stay with you. Marcus knelt down, bringing himself eye level with Bear. The dog tilted his head, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand the depth of gratitude in his master's gaze. "I owe you everything, boy. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of your loyalty." As they continued their walk, they encountered other hikers. Some recognized Marcus from the news coverage of his survival story. Most were respectful, simply nodding acknowledgement. But one young couple, both wearing guide certifications on their packs, approached with obvious excitement. "Mr. Webb, I hope we're not bothering you, but we wanted to thank you," the young woman said. "We just completed our advanced guide training, and your survival protocols were a core part of the curriculum. The emphasis on respecting weather patterns over client pressure, on having the courage to turn back, it's changing the culture of mountain guiding." Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the summer sun. "Thank you for telling me that. Stay safe out there, and remember, the mountains will always be here. Making it home is more important than making it to any summit." As the couple walked away, Emma smiled at her father. "See, you're making a difference." "We're making a difference," Marcus corrected. "This wouldn't have been possible without you taking time from your studies to help me recover, without Sarah and David risking their lives to find me, without Richard having the humility to transform his guilt into something constructive, and certainly not without this incredible dog who refused to accept defeat." They reached the summit of a smaller peak nearby, one Marcus could manage with his current limitations. From here, they could see Mount Elbert in the distance, its peak still dotted with snow even in summer. Marcus pulled out his phone and called Richard Hoffman, who answered immediately. "Richard, I'm looking at Elbert right now," Marcus said, "and I wanted you to know something. I don't blame you for what happened. We both made mistakes that day, me for agreeing to continue when conditions were deteriorating, you for pushing when you should have listened. But those mistakes led to changes that are making the mountains safer for everyone. That's a legacy worth having." Richard's voice came through thick with emotion. "Thank you, Marcus. I've been carrying that guilt for months. But you're right. We turned a near tragedy into something positive. The Foundation just funded a new emergency shelter system for high-altitude routes. It's being installed next month." After ending the call, Marcus sat on a flat rock, Emma and Sarah joining him. Bear lay down at his feet, content to rest in the sunshine. Below them, the valley spread out in breathtaking beauty, forests, rivers, meadows of wildflowers. It was a view Marcus had seen thousands of times, but now it looked different, more precious, more vivid. "You know what the strangest part of the whole experience was?" Marcus said quietly. "When I thought I was dying, when the cold was pulling me under, I felt this overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the life I'd lived, for Emma, for every sunrise I'd seen from these mountains, for every client I'd safely guided. Even in what I thought were my final moments, I was grateful rather than bitter. That realization changed me." Emma wiped tears from her eyes. "Dad, you're making me cry." "Good tears, I hope," Marcus replied, putting his arm around her. "Because here's what I learned. Life is fragile and precious and can be taken away in an instant, but it's also incredibly resilient. The human body and spirit can endure things that seem impossible. Love, loyalty, determination. These things can overcome even the most extreme circumstances. I was given a second chance, and I'm not going to waste it." A year after his rescue, Marcus stood in front of an audience of 200 mountain guides, safety officials, and wilderness educators at the National Mountain Guide Conference in Denver. His presentation, titled Survival Against Impossible Odds, Lessons from -71, had drawn record attendance. Bear sat beside the podium, calm and attentive, wearing a vest that identified him as a certified therapy dog, a new role he had taken on to help others. "I want to start by showing you this," Marcus began, displaying a slide of himself before the accident. Strong, confident, perhaps a bit too sure of himself. Then he showed a slide from the hospital. Broken, bandaged, barely recognizable. Finally, he showed a recent photo of himself standing on a mountain trail, Bear by his side, Emma hugging him. This is the journey from arrogance to humility to purpose. He walked the audience through every decision made that fateful day, not sparing himself criticism. He detailed the warning signs he had ignored, the pressure he had felt to satisfy a paying client, the false confidence that had made him believe he could handle any situation. His honesty was raw and painful, but it was also instructive. "The most dangerous thing in the mountains isn't the weather or the terrain," Marcus said. "It's ego. It's the voice in your head that says you're experienced enough, skilled enough, tough enough to push through when conditions say stop. I had 23 years of experience, and it nearly killed me because I let that experience breed overconfidence." He shared the medical data from his case, core temperature readings, the extent of frostbite damage, the timeline of hypothermia progression. Dr. Moreno had provided detailed analysis showing just how close to death Marcus had come at multiple points during his ordeal. "According to every medical model, every survival statistic, I should have died between hour 4 and hour 6, Marcus explained. "The fact that I made it to hour 12 defies medical explanation. But here's what did save me: preparation, quality gear, and this dog." He gestured to Bear, who stood and gave a small wag of his tail, drawing appreciative sounds from the audience. Bear's decision to stay with me, to share his body heat, created a micro-environment that kept my core temperature just above the fatal threshold. His refusal to abandon me, even when it put his own life at risk, demonstrates something we can't quantify in our safety protocols: the value of loyalty and determination. Marcus then detailed the new safety protocols that had emerged from his experience. The Foundation had worked with meteorologists, medical experts, and experienced guides to develop comprehensive guidelines for extreme cold weather expeditions. These included mandatory turnback thresholds based on objective criteria rather than subjective judgment, improved emergency communication systems, and enhanced training in cold weather survival medicine. "We've also developed a mentorship program pairing experienced guides with newer ones," Marcus continued. "Not to teach technical skills, most guide training programs do that well, but to teach judgment, to help newer guides develop the instinct to know when to say no to a client, when to turn back, when to prioritize safety over summit success." During the question and answer session, a young guide raised her hand. "Mr. Webb, how did you cope mentally with the losses you suffered? Losing fingers, knowing you couldn't guide the way you used to. How did you not fall into despair?" Marcus took a moment to collect his thoughts. "I did fall into despair," he admitted. "For the first 2 months after the accident, I was deeply depressed. I felt like my identity had been taken away. Guiding wasn't just what I did, it was who I was. Without that, I didn't know who Marcus Webb was supposed to be." He paused, looking at Emma, who sat in the front row. "My daughter reminded me that I was still a father, still someone who understood these mountains, still someone with knowledge and experience to share. She helped me see that my value wasn't in what I could do physically, but in what I could teach, what wisdom I could pass on. That perspective saved me from a different kind of death, a spiritual and emotional one." Another attendee asked about Bear's role going forward. Marcus smiled and knelt beside the dog. "After our recovery, I had Bear certified as a therapy dog. We now visit hospitals and rehabilitation centers, particularly working with trauma survivors and people recovering from wilderness accidents. Bear seems to understand that his job is to bring comfort now, and he's exceptional at it. His presence reminds people that survival is possible, that loyalty and love can overcome incredible obstacles. As the conference concluded, Marcus was approached by dozens of guides, thanking him for his honesty and courage in sharing his story. Several admitted they had made similar judgment calls in the past, pushing forward when they should have turned back, and had simply gotten lucky. His story had made them commit to higher standards. That evening, a special ceremony was held, honoring those who had participated in Marcus's rescue. Sarah Chen, David Rodriguez, and the entire rescue team received commendations for their bravery and skill. But the most emotional moment came when Bear received a special recognition, the National Mountain Rescue Association's first ever Canine Valor Award. As Marcus accepted the medal on Bear's behalf, he struggled to control his emotions. This dog embodies everything we should aspire to as guides and rescuers: loyalty, determination, courage, and an unwavering commitment to never giving up on someone in need. He's a better guide than I ever was because he never let ego or pride interfere with doing what was right. Later that night, back in their hotel room, Emma helped her father remove the prosthetic sleeve he wore over his damaged hand. It was a private moment, something they had shared every night during his recovery. She gently massaged the scarred tissue, helping maintain flexibility and circulation. "Dad, I'm so proud of you," Emma said softly. "Not for surviving, though that's incredible, but for how you've used that survival to help others. You've turned your worst mistake into your greatest contribution." Marcus smiled, tears forming in his eyes. "Your mother would have been proud too. She always said that our trials define us less than how we respond to them. I think she was right." They sat in comfortable silence, Bear snoring softly on the floor beside them. Outside, the lights of Denver sparkled against the dark backdrop of the mountains beyond. Those peaks had nearly claimed Marcus's life, but they had also taught him lessons he could never have learned otherwise, about humility, resilience, and the precious nature of every moment we're given. "Next week, we start the scholarship program," Emma reminded him. 10 aspiring guides from low-income backgrounds getting full training and certification through the foundation. "Your idea," Marcus noted with pride, "and a brilliant one. The mountains shouldn't be accessible only to those who can afford expensive training. We need diverse voices and perspectives in this field." Emma smiled. "I learned from the best. You always said the mountains belong to everyone. That part of a guide's job is to make the wilderness accessible and safe for all people. Now we're just extending that philosophy." Marcus pulled his daughter into a hug. "Thank you for saving my life in your own way. The medical team brought my body back, but you brought my spirit back. You reminded me that I still had purpose, still had value, still had reasons to fight through the pain and depression." "That's what family does," Emma replied. "We showed up for each other, just like Bear showed up for you on that mountain." 2 years after the accident, Marcus returned to the exact spot where he had nearly died. It was August now, warm and clear, a stark contrast to the deadly conditions he had endured. A small group accompanied him: Emma, Sarah, David, Richard, Dr. Moreno, and of course Bear. They had come to install a memorial marker, not for Marcus, he had survived, but for all who had lost their lives in these mountains and for the lessons learned from those losses. The marker was a beautiful bronze plaque mounted on a natural stone formation. It read, "In memory of all who have been claimed by these peaks and in honor of those who refuse to give up. The mountains test us, humble us, and teach us. May we learn wisdom from their lessons," dedicated by the Marcus Webb Mountain Safety Foundation. As they stood in a circle around the marker, each person shared reflections. Sarah spoke first. "Standing here 2 years ago, helping search for Marcus, I thought we were recovering a body. The fact that he's here with us today, alive and thriving, is a testament to preparation, determination, and the incredible bond between a man and his dog. This memorial reminds us that every decision we make in the mountains matters. David added, "Following Bear through that storm was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But Bear never wavered, never doubted. He knew Marcus was alive, and he was determined to bring help. That kind of certainty, that refusal to accept defeat, is something I carry with me on every rescue now." Richard Hoffman's voice shook with emotion. "I come here carrying both guilt and gratitude. My arrogance contributed to a near tragedy, but the experience transformed me. I learned that wealth and success mean nothing if you lack humility and respect for forces greater than yourself. This foundation, the work we've done, it's my way of trying to balance the scales, to ensure that my mistake leads to positive change." Dr. Moreno provided a medical perspective. Marcus's survival has contributed significantly to our understanding of extreme cold weather trauma. The data from his case has informed new treatment protocols, new research into hypothermia, and better survival guidelines for extreme environments. His willingness to share every detail of his experience, despite how personal and traumatic it was, has literally saved lives in emergency rooms and on mountains around the world. Emma spoke last, her voice strong and clear. "My dad taught me to love these mountains, to respect their power, and to understand that they are neither friend nor enemy. They simply are. What happened here tested him in ways that should have broken him, but instead, it refined him. He's a better father, a better teacher, and a better man because of what he endured, and I'm a better person for witnessing his recovery and transformation." Finally, Marcus stepped forward. He placed his scarred hand on the memorial stone, feeling its cool surface beneath his remaining fingers. "I thought I knew these mountains. I thought 23 years of experience had taught me everything I needed to know, but I was wrong. The mountain's greatest lesson came in this spot, at -71 degrees, when everything I thought I knew was stripped away." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "What I learned is that survival isn't just about physical endurance or technical skill. It's about humility, about knowing when to push forward and when to turn back. It's about the connections we have with others, the loyalty of a dog, the dedication of rescuers, the love of family, the courage of friends willing to risk their lives for ours." Bear, as if understanding the solemnity of the moment, moved to Marcus's side and sat, his head pressed against his master's leg. Marcus reached down to stroke the dog's head, his voice thick with emotion. "This dog stayed with me through 12 hours of hell. He should have descended to safety, should have saved himself, but he chose loyalty over survival, companionship over comfort. In doing so, he saved my life and taught me what true courage looks like." The group stood in silence for several minutes, each lost in their own thoughts, their own memories of that terrible day and its aftermath. The mountain wind whispered through the rocks, carrying the distant sound of snowmelt streams and the calls of birds. It was peaceful here now, beautiful, giving no indication of the deadly force it had unleashed 2 years earlier. "Let's make a promise," Marcus said, breaking the silence. "Everyone here, everyone who hears this story, let's promise to honor the mountain's power, to respect its lessons, to choose wisdom over ego and safety over summit. Let's remember that getting home to the people who love us is always more important than reaching any peak." They each placed a hand on the memorial stone, a physical commitment to the promise. As they did, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the marker with golden light. It felt symbolic, a benediction from the mountains themselves. As they prepared to descend, Richard approached Marcus privately. "I have something to tell you. The foundation has been so successful, we're expanding internationally. We're partnering with mountain rescue organizations in Nepal, the Alps, and the Andes. Your story, your protocols, your emphasis on safety over ego, it's becoming a global standard. Marcus was overwhelmed. Richard, I never imagined that my near-death experience could have such far-reaching impact. That's the thing about survival stories, Richard replied. They don't just inspire, they teach. Every guide who learns from your experience, every life saved by the protocols we've developed, every person who makes the hard decision to turn back because of lessons you've shared, that's your legacy. The descent was slow and careful, Marcus taking his time with his injured leg, but he moved with confidence, with awareness, with deep respect for every step. Emma walked beside him, occasionally steadying him on rough terrain. Bear ranged ahead but constantly circled back, his protective instincts never dormant. At the base camp, they found a surprise waiting, a group of over 50 current and former clients Marcus had guided over the years. They had come to celebrate his survival and to share how his teaching had impacted their lives. One by one, they told stories of how Marcus's emphasis on safety, his respect for the wilderness, his careful judgment, had kept them safe on expeditions around the world. A woman named Jennifer stood up, her eyes brimming with tears. 10 years ago, Marcus guided my husband and me up Mount Rainier. Halfway through the climb, conditions deteriorated. My husband wanted to push on. We had traveled so far, spent so much money. But Marcus made the call to turn back. My husband was furious at the time, but 3 hours later, the weather turned catastrophic. Several climbers who had continued died in the storm. Marcus's judgment saved our lives, and we didn't even fully appreciate it until later. Similar stories followed, a testament to years of careful, professional guiding. Marcus listened, humbled, and moved. He had saved lives not just through this one dramatic survival story, but through decades of small, careful decisions, of choosing safety over ego, of respecting the mountain's power. As the gathering concluded, Emma pulled her father aside. "Dad, I have some news. I've been accepted into a graduate program studying climate change's impact on mountain ecosystems. I want to continue your work in a different way, understanding how warming temperatures are changing the mountains, how that affects safety, how we need to adapt our approaches." Marcus beamed with pride. "Your mother would be so proud. I'm so proud. You're taking everything you've learned and using it to make a difference." "I learned from the best," Emma replied, kissing her father's cheek. "You taught me that our experiences, even our failures and near tragedies, can become our greatest teachers if we let them." That night, back at Marcus's home in Colorado Springs, the family gathered, Emma, Marcus, and Bear. They sat on the porch, looking up at the stars and the dark silhouettes of mountains against the night sky. Bear lay with his head in Marcus's lap, content and peaceful. "It's been quite a journey," Marcus reflected. "From the heights of overconfidence to the depths of near death, through pain and recovery to finding new purpose and meaning. If someone had told me 2 years ago that losing my fingers and nearly dying would be the best thing that ever happened to me, I would have thought they were crazy." "But it's true?" Emma asked. "It's true," Marcus confirmed. "Not because I'm glad it happened. I'm not. The pain was real, the trauma was real, the losses were real. But what came from it? The lessons learned, the lives saved by new protocols, the foundation's work, the opportunity to teach and mentor, the deeper relationship with you, the appreciation for every single moment. All of that is real too, and it's profound." He stroked Bear's head, feeling the soft fur beneath his scarred hand. "And this dog, this incredible, loyal, courageous dog, he showed me what love really means. Not the easy love of comfortable moments, but the hard love that stays when everything says run, that fights when giving up would be easier, that believes in survival even when all evidence points to death." Emma leaned against her father's shoulder. "So, what's next? What's the next chapter in the Marcus Webb story?" Marcus smiled. "More of this, I think. More teaching, more mentoring, more time with you and Bear. Maybe I'll write a book about the experience, not for glory, but to reach people who might never attend a conference or read a safety manual. Maybe I'll develop a documentary series about mountain safety and survival. But whatever comes next, I'll approach it with humility, gratitude, and respect for the lessons the mountain taught me.